Good afternoon and welcome to an informational webinar on Discipline Agile, the Scrum Master certification. Sharing this sort of along the lines of a change management ad car type thing. This is hopefully raise some awareness of what we're talking about with a training that we're going to be offering in the next couple of weeks at the Central Ohio chapter of PMI, and give you kind of a flavor for what we're going to cover in the class and really what Disciplined Agile is. I'd say we're probably going to hit a 500,000 foot level. We're not going to go into too much detail, but again, it's to raise a little bit of your awareness of what we're talking about. And we are offering training at a significant discount through PMI. We are authorized training partners with PMI, and we're putting this together to sort of let you know what we're talking about with Discipline Agile, because I know, like everything in the Agile world, it has a lot of misunderstanding and et cetera, and so hopefully we'll clear that up a little bit. I wanted to start with a little antidote here. I'd always like to start my presentations with a little story or something. And this is a quote from Abraham Lincoln, and I've known this for years. And Stephen Covey used it a lot in his 7 Habits of Effective People. But if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. What we're talking about here is providing you the capability to sharpen the axe. And so you're able to be more effective at cutting down the trees. But this antidote goes really a little farther. I mean, okay, so Abe has something about sharpening an axe, but I kind of have some questions that go around this that I think fits into the Disciplined Agile world. First of all, why are we cutting down this tree? I mean, I just feel like I want to cut down a tree. Somebody's paying me. I don't know. Why are we doing it? So the Discipline Agile is looking at context around all these things. You know, cut down the tree may be considered a story in an Agile world or a task. And so there's some other questions. Where is the tree? And what tree am I cutting down? I guess I care what kind of tree it is too. Based on experience, cutting down an oak tree is a lot different than cutting down a pine tree. Is this the only tree I need to do? I mean, if it's one tree only, an axe might work, but if there's 50 trees, I may want a chainsaw. And what tools do I have other than an axe? And then finally, what do I do with the tree after it's fallen? So this little antidote, or whatever term we want to use with it, not metaphor, whatever, does sort of look at things from a holistic point of view, not just that task. And Discipline Agile is that. It is a framework. And we're going to talk about how this framework really sets a structure in order to make decisions for what is my best tool to use within an iteration. So reason why we're doing this is next week, we're going to be offering virtually a Discipline Agile Scrum Master training. And this is through the PMI Central Ohio chapter. It's Thursday and Friday. The class is going to include 2 days of virtual training. You will get a code to take the certification exam. Now that needs to be used within 30 days, but unlike PMP, where you take a class and you have to go out and buy a seat in order to sit for the exam, this all comes together as one package. And also you'll get digital copies of the training material, which will help you prepare for the exam. And it's available, register online through the PMI COC website. I've got the specific URL there, but I guess at the end, you'll see my address. You can shoot me an email, copy of this. I'll give it to you so you can have the URL. By the way, this is open. If you have questions or anything, don't be afraid to say, hey, Dave, I got a question. And by the way, welcome, Kevin. Glad to have you aboard. So let's get into a little bit of what are we talking about. Again, as I mentioned before, the purpose of this is to raise awareness. So Disciplined Agile itself, and you'll see the acronym DA, was acquired in PMI in August of 2019. And PMI made the decision because they realized Agile was a reality. It was not a fad. And that organizations really are in a hybrid mode. And we need to be able, from a PMI certification perspective, be able to span as much of the spectrum as we can. And rather go and try and build our own thing at PMI, they made the decision to buy. And so they acquired this DA firm, which was a relatively small firm out of Canada. It has been around a while and actually it has a real good pedigree. They have people that the founders have a background in SAFe, if any of you are familiar with that Scale Agile framework. And even before that, they were involved in Rationale Software, which was a requirements management tool that IBM acquired. So they've got a lot of experience in a lot of different ways. And so what they're trying to do with DA is really provide guidance. And they'd like to use this acronym WOW, way of work, in a context-sensitive manner. You'll even see a slide later on that talks about context and choice. But that's kind of the whole idea of this is a framework. Based on your situation, your context, which can be lots of things, where you are in the project, the makeup of your team members, the makeup of your organization, you should be able to have a choice in what tool to use to meet the goal of your next iteration. And so DA is a toolkit of these strategies and practices to complement Agile framework or methods. And they even mentioned SAFe in here, which of course is a scaling, more of a PMO level methodology. So Discipline Agile is focused on helping you implement this framework to have the best tool based on the context of what you're doing. A little bit of the history is a little graphical. 2019 PMI did acquire Discipline Agile. Discipline Agile then went and acquired, I'll say, a tool called Flex. Is actually part of an organization called Net Objectives. But what Flex brings to the table, and we're not going to talk about it too much here, is the idea of scaling across the PMO. As I've mentioned several times in my talks, et cetera, I really don't care about scaling Agile per se. I want to scale everything in my PMO. I don't care if it's an infrastructure project, a software as a service project, a new construction project. I still need to be able to utilize my resources across the enterprise. And that's what Flex brings to the table. Kind of a combination of managing an intake funnel and then defining your program and then defining the different components that deliver value. So it's clearly a value stream model there in Flex, and looks at things such as what's my minimal value. They use minimal business increments as their measure. We could relate that to a benefit, whatever, but they still bring that idea of scaling across the enterprise. And as most of us know, if you're doing anything with Agile, a Agile team probably is only doing one piece of the product, and there's multiple pieces of the product being modified at the same time. So it tries to coordinate that activity. So what we are and what Andy and I do and why we're doing this training, et cetera, is help this journey to leverage your team so you add the value to the organization. Why do we care about this? Well, because Agile in and of itself, while one of its greatest strengths is its flexibility, also its Achilles heel is its flexibility. Since the Agile Manifesto at the beginning of this century, we now have gone into all sorts of different things that are happening. And this page is really nothing more than to throw out some buzzwords or ideas or whatever that kind of are all supporting Agile ideas. Apologize for that. So there's hundreds of practices. There's a lot of overlap among these different areas, et cetera. I actually saw a email earlier this year where there's over 200 Agile certifications in North America alone. And so there's all these different things. What's tying them together? And the answer was nothing was tying them together. What we're trying to do with Disciplined Agile is bring these together in a framework, not necessarily a silver bullet that's going to seamlessly incorporate everyone, but help you to utilize the best tool based on the context of where you are. And this umbrella is just that. It's an umbrella. It is not forcing a specific methodology. Instead, it supports multiple methodologies, but wants to make sure that you've made an intelligent decision on what methodology or practice or tool, whatever you want to call it, to use at that stage in your delivery. And like I said, they use the term way of working, which is WOW, which is lets the team choose how they want to do it. And if you have an experienced agile team, you may want to be a little bit more lean in some of your methodology as opposed to a new one that may want to be more Scrum specific and spend a lot more time understanding the backlog. And this is PMI marketing term slide. I'll just go right through it. By the way, a lot of these slides are from the PMI discipline agile stuff to begin with. Time to up our agile game. Organizations are really tired of proprietary, inflexible, all the bad things that we've been hearing about for years and years and years, and trying to get around it. What brought agile about in the first place was dissatisfaction with very elongated development processes. I actually was at AT&T for 26 years plus, and we had a meeting with some, quote, users, unquote, and our director asked, how long do you think it takes for a need or a requirement to go from your idea into production? And one of the guys says, 36 months. It's like, wow, how can we shorten that? So that's kind of the things that brought Agile about. And then we talk about the Agile industrial complex. I don't think you can pick up anything in the project management world today where Agile isn't thrown out there somewhere in the text. But it has become fragmented, and it doesn't have leadership. And there's some other things in here. Again, this is a discipline agile slide, so I'm not going to go into what unprofessional behavior means, but I think we kind of have an all idea that everything is susceptible to some sort of violation of the standards or the rules. And then finally, the time really is right. This last one is the one I shared this slide. For PMI to bring a professional approach to mindful and bespoke agile. PMI has a strong community support, credible certification program. It is a standard in project management. So it's expanding its project management reach to bring in Agile, specifically disciplined Agile. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, about the different certifications. I'm sorry, I was looking at my presenter screen where all this was up, and I didn't realize it hadn't been shared with you on the screen. So quickly, organizations are growing tired, Agile complex has become out of control, and it's time's right for PMI to bring things together. These are the PMI certifications, and these have changed somewhat even since PMI acquired Discipline Agile. There are now 5 certifications. I'm just going to go through them fairly quickly here. But one that's been around a while is the ACP, which is the Agile Certified Practitioner. It is not part of the Discipline Agile suite per se. It's part of the Agile suite. And that's been around a while. It's a PMI certification that started several years ago. And I'd like to say that it's probably more of a high-level business approach to Agile. It talks about different methodologies. It focuses a lot on what Agile means, not only for a product team, but for the enterprise and some of the different roles that come in. Still, good certification means a lot. And if you have an ACP, currently, it can be used to meet some of the criteria in order to sit for the exams of the other ones. Let me jump over to DASM, which is what we're talking about for our class next week. And that's a Discipline Agile Certified Scrum Master. I threw in the word certified. It used to be in the acronym, but it's not anymore. But it's the entry level. So you don't really need to have a lot of knowledge of Agile coming in. As you'll notice here, it says 0 years of Agile experience. It's a 2-day training, and you do have to pass an exam to get that certification. But it is a PMI certification, so you can slap the acronyms behind your name and your professional correspondence, and et cetera. We're going to spend the rest of this time talking about what we're going to cover in the DASM. You can then go from the DASM to a little bit higher level, which is the Senior Scrum Master, which is just advanced, means you have some more experience, etc. You've had some more training on where this fits in. And I think it also implies that you understand several different practices or methodologies and why that might be the correct tool to use or the correct practice to use in this iteration. For example, some of you may be familiar with test-driven development. That's a software where we're doing the testing plans up front, and so we develop to make sure we meet the test, etc. A little bit different than Scrum, but Scrum, which is kind of the landmark for Agile, is one accepted practice. Test-driven development, another one. Kanban, maybe another one. Then we have some that we'll introduce here a little bit later. But the DASSM demonstrates that you have a good understanding of these and a practical implementation of. Then we're going to get into the people side and have a coach certification. This is future meaning 2021. I don't know a lot of detail about what it's all going to mean, but I like the idea of focusing on the human development piece and getting that agile mindset across the enterprise. Then finally, this last one that I talked about before when we acquired Flex, that is morphed into the Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant. And this is looking at a PMO and scaling your projects across the organization. This one's also coming out in 2021. But it really looks at applying lean principles to determine the value stream and how you're going to implement multiple, say, work teams across the spectrum. And the whole idea of lean, which is what's based on value stream, has two major areas. One is to reduce waste. We spend a lot of time developing things that will never be used that we shouldn't be developing. So this tries to address those. And two is time wasted in queue. You probably all had many experiences in your career where something got done Friday afternoon and it sat on a desk for 3 or 4 days until you had to prod somebody to do the next step. So hopefully with these principles within the DAVSC, we will reduce that delay in queue. So these are the certifications that PMI is offering. We are talking about doing a class on the DASM, which means that when you leave the class, pass the exam, that you have a basic understanding of Agile principles, and as we'll talk about a little bit later, the four perspectives within Disciplined Agile. I purposely put this little picture here of a gardener having planted a seed because I kind of like, as you guys will find out, I like analogies and metaphors and all that kind of stuff. But that's what we're proposing here with this training, is that you'll have the knowledge here to be able to plant the seed and help the plant grow. You're not going to leave here with a full-fledged tomato plant where you're picking tomatoes, but you are going to leave with fertile ground, seed planted, and things prepared for it to grow and to be able to harvest the tomatoes. And that one also an important, very important concept here when we talk about Disciplined Agile. We're not saying throw away everything you have. We're saying adopt this framework, which will incorporate your existing Agile practices and be able to choose the proper tool to meet your goals of an iteration based on a practice choice that is best for your iteration goal. I know that's a little wordy, but the idea is if you currently have Joe's Agile methodology and you guys are all comfortable with Joe's Agile methodology and you want to keep using it, it can fit into the Disciplined Agile framework. Disciplined Agile is actually based on, as I talked about, way of work, which is captured in a book that, by the way, if you're a PMI member, it's a PMI benefit. You can download a PDF copy. But it is kind of, I'll say, the field manual for Disciplined Agile delivery. This is the marketing terms here. Success doesn't come from adopting a framework or methodology. That could be a good start. But for agility, we need to choose our way of working. Here again, bespoke Agile, optimizing for a unique situation. Reason why I put this up here is because this is that fertile soil that I was talking about before. Everything we're going to talk about today and in the class is supported by something in this Choose Your Wow document. And I believe you, if you're not a PMI member, I think you will get this as part of your course materials. One of the concepts that I guess critical to the whole discipline agile, not just discipline agile, but agile in general, is the idea of continuous improvement. And the discipline agile approach is continuous improvement. You got to start somewhere, so you can start where you are, but in increments, you're constantly doing things better. You're going to have a little bit negative dip when you start, learning curves and other things, comfort level, norm, storm, form, perform, components of teamwork. But then you're going to start to improve. And where we come in with the discipline agile comes in, continuous improvement is going to be able to get you a certain amount of return on your value. Guided continuous improvement, which is a subset of the way of work discipline agile, will get you greater returns because it puts some science behind it and some structure. You'll frequently see within the discipline agile documentation and things like that on this guided continuous improvement and using scientific method approach of where you're being driven by data, you make hypothesis and you either prove or disprove the hypothesis and continually trying to get small incremental gains in both team productivity, organizational effectiveness, and product quality. And we will talk a lot about continuous improvement in the class. It's a key concept. Oh, and PMI Discipline Agile helps you get that higher level with the continuous improvement. And again, it's because it is built into it. It's a structure with some tools, techniques, and processes in order to help the team and, let's say, the organization continually improve. Discipline Agile itself has 4 views. There's a mindset view, which is kind of overarching of everything. And mindset isn't just a development team, it is the enterprise. If you have a great agile team in IT that's fantastic at doing sprints and delivering product and doing demos, et cetera, that's not going to be as effective if the business side isn't agile. So you need to make sure that everybody has an agile mindset. And the agile mindset means adapting to change, not having huge behemoth plans, but doing your plans in increments and adjusting to things that happen in the real world. And the mindset piece, gets into that ability to be able to, quote, fail fast and take chances and some of those other things, but providing a safe environment. And I'll talk about some of the guidelines here and all of these in a little bit. Flow. I talked about value stream. Flow is the whole way how work really happens. It flows through different processes and different gates. It's not a top-down approach. It's actually a lateral approach. And that's where we'll get into life cycles and workflows, which are a component of Discipline Agile. And actually, you'll hear the term practices too. Discipline Agile is kind of I'll criticize them here a little bit. Some of the things that they say that are wrong with the Agile world, they're a little bit guilty of doing, such as maybe calling the same thing 2 or 3 different things. But I think we can live with that and work through it. And practices, that's actually based on the goal of what we're trying to do in iteration. What's the best practice to meet that need? And then finally, people. People's at the top. I shouldn't have said finally, but of my 4, that's where it fits in finally. And it does talk about some roles and responsibilities, but it doesn't dictate the roles and responsibilities. And it definitely doesn't dictate name. And you can have somebody that's a, quote, a project lead or a team lead or a champion or whatever. It doesn't really care what the title is. It's the functions that are performed in those roles that they need to make sure those are covered. So let's talk about mindset a little bit. Mindset's in 3 areas: principles, I'm not going to go through these principles one by one, but there's 8 principles and they're covered in detail. Delight customers, of course, being at the top of the list. Being aware of enterprise, context counts, you optimize the flow. But this is a way that these principles help us to be a more effective team or a more effective PMO. And we promise in support of these principles that we're going to give you a safe environment, both psychological safety, diversity, that whole thing of taking risk. I won't necessarily fail fast. Hopefully it's not fail fast, but learn early. We can put a lot of cliches and other stuff around there. But the promise is that we're going to make it that when you come to work, you're going to be able to focus on your work. I really like to use a part of a presentation I saw many years ago. I don't know how many of you are familiar with a man named Gene Kranz. He was the flight commander for Apollo 11 and Apollo 13, of which you all saw the movie Apollo 13 probably, and his famous line that failure is not an option. By the way, Gene Kranz denies that he ever said that. In that context, you might have added a few adjectives, he said. But one of the things that he brought to it that I think applies here is he used the term check your ego at the door. And he said he would actually at time just stop and ask somebody to go outside, get a cup of coffee, come back, check their ego at the door. Very matter-of-factly, not too confrontational, and the team knew what that meant, and they adapted to it. So that's kind of where mindset fits into. But we also talk about making workflow visible, keeping within our capacity, constant, continuous improvement. So these promises mean that we're going to let you contribute, we're going to take you seriously, and you're going to own a lot of this. I won't say it's necessarily a self-governing team because there's never anybody that's 100% self-governing, but it does give you a lot of control over how things are done. And the thing I've seen in my career with Agile teams, they think they're self-governing. Self-governing doesn't just happen. It needs to be coached. People need to be opportunities to experience success with self-governing, willing to take risks, et cetera, et cetera. We talk about that with these mindsets. Then the last, these guidelines. And these, they're a little bit more than motherhood and apple pie, but here we're talking about things such as validate our learning, design thinking. We're not in a vacuum. We understand that we're part of an enterprise. Cultural change the culture by improving the system. We do spend some time on the culture and how, regardless of our continuous improvements within a little team, we need to have influence on the culture, and that may be a little bit more of a challenge. And then adopting measures. That gets into that continuous improvement we were talking earlier. And then leverage and enhance our organizational assets. That sounds kind of cold because it means not only people, but tools, processes, workflows, et cetera, et cetera. So these are guidelines that we're able to contribute. We're able to try to improve lots of things. And we give examples of how to do this within your Agile teams. Here's the principles again. Delight customers. Be awesome. Context counts. Pragmatic. Choice is good. Optimize flow. Organize around products and services and enterprise awareness. So that means as you go into your teams that you understand that these are the principles that we're trying to realize. A lot of things are going principle based. Actually, the PMI PMBOK Guide 7 is principles based. So principles are just that. That's a set of rules and guidelines of which we try to live by. I'm going to jump on through here. We cover these in pretty lower level of detail, especially a couple of these we'll talk about a little bit later on. But I'd say be pragmatic is sort of a thread throughout, that we're not doing things to gold plate things. We're doing things because we're delivering value, we're eliminating waste, or we're eliminating time and queue. One of the core things with those values has to do with context counts and choice is good. And I'm unbelievable popular here right at the moment. What context counts means that as you're going through an iteration of an agile delivery, where you are in the project is a context. This is a planning for each iteration. The whole idea of discipline agile, well, even goes back to rolling wave planning and all that, is you plan where we are the next iteration of work. So where's the project? In our organization, how mature are we? And what's our skill set does the team possess? This context may help us decide what sort of tool we wish to use. And so understanding where we are, and then my goal, where do I want to be? Overall, where is this project at? It's at the beginning. It may be at the beginning and we're doing something that we need some input from people from finance. So we're going to have some sort of tool where we select the finance blade in order to get through this next iteration. We may be a little bit later on and looking at trying to do some sort of hardening iteration in order to make things production ready. So that's what's my goal. So this is my goal, so I can go to a decision tree or a goal diagram, which gives me choices, which allows me to choose the best tool. So also in the goal, I talk about here, this looks redundant on how mature is the organization, but part of the goal could be in order to enhance, cross-training some people on the team. And then the other is the skill set. Again, we may not have the level of experience we need, let's say on calculating taxes. We may have a fairly new team. And so this iteration, we really want to help a couple new developers to the team understand how our tax modules work. So one of our goals here for this iteration may be to focus on stories that are specific to taxes. And so we would choose a tool that does best uses that, which may very well be a traditional Scrum workflow where you have a series of stories in your backlog and you work them out. And then your choice is good. Based on here, I may want to do Scrum. I may want to do something that's lean, Kanban, Scrum. These are existing methodologies. I mentioned before, if you have your Joe's methodology, you can use it here. OCM, for those who aren't aware of, is usually referred to as organizational change management. Talked about before that this is technology agnostic or methodology agnostic. It's also business case agnostic. You may be using these tools in order to enhance something in a manufacturing world, definitely to enhance things in the architectural world, or you may be doing software development. So based on, again, the context, what we're trying to do, we support multiple iterations, and we're not saying you need to throw them out, because a lot of organizations have put years into developing things they are comfortable with. And quite frankly, a lot of them have built stuff around how Jira works. Well, if you have a process around how Jira works, you can still use your process around how Jira works, because we don't dictate any sort of tools to use to support it. We'll spend a lot of time on this thing with business agility and process blades. And again, remember, this is just to raise awareness. It has a foundation here of principles, which we talked about, promises we've talked about, guidelines, agile, lean, serial. These are things that have been existing for a while. We're not trying, we have it based on proven scientific things. And these foundations can be utilized throughout. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because I could spend probably 40 minutes just on this slide alone. But these things in the hexagons are known as blades. And we're going to talk about how these different blades fit at different levels to be able to help you implement discipline agile framework. And it's purposely here, they talk about some enterprise level, some of the specific to value stream, and then specifically to even DevOps we bring in. By the way, an acronym I probably should have mentioned earlier is this one called DAD, Discipline Agile Delivery, and it's a specific to Discipline Agile. We don't have a mom, but we do have a dad. But it's a work stream or a practice that we're able to utilize. And these things do have a relationship vertically and horizontally across the spectrum. You may even say that if any of you remember the old Willy Wonka, you're riding the Wonkavator. You can start here, move there, go up, down, in, out. but we help you to understand how to utilize these different practices or different workflows in order to meet the goal of an iteration. And these are the DAD life cycles that I'll say, quote, come out of the box, unquote. WOW talks about these specifically, but if you have your own, you could easily have this as a life cycle or a practice. And these have some similarities, but as we'll get into the class, we'll look at some of the differences. I'll say for the most part, the difference between some of the Agile and some of the Lean is Agile has a much more defined iteration planning of what is my backlog. Lean is more along the lines of, I finished these stories, I'm just going to go into the story backlog and choose the next one to do because I'm mature and intelligent enough that if I'm ahead of the game, I'm not going to wait for the iteration to end. So there's 6 that I said do come out of DAD that we will talk about in this class, but it does support multiple ones. And here's one of these practices. All those practices I showed on the previous screen, we will have an exercise around. This is one known as Disciplined Agile Delivery, or DAD. You'll notice that it has similarities to Agile Scrum. Has inputs from lots of places. You build a backlog, overall product backlog, which then you select certain high value work items for an iteration backlog. Then you do your task, you go through your iteration. You have a consumable solution. You'll hear the term consumable solution as opposed to minimal viable product in the Disciplined Agile world. And then there's ceremonies. Don't use the term ceremonies in the Disciplined Agile. I stole that one from the Scrum world. But to wrap up, so we have structure around retrospectives, demos, etc. That consumable solution goes into production, and then we operate and support in production, which is operation that generates change requests back in the iteration. Also, this is supported by a life cycle, which is also helps to define milestones, because we're not going to get away from milestones reporting dates up to management. And the life cycle is pretty simple. There's inception, construction, and transition. And based on where you are in here may drive why this is the best tool to use at that point in the iteration. But all of them have these 3 life cycles. Some of them may be very short. Inception may be very short, like in a lean world, as I talked about before, where they're been doing these for 2 years and they understand stories and they work them, move them out. And then construction, of course, is building it. And then transition, we got to get into operations. And we also look at here the operation support. What are my KPIs, or whatever am I using to measure the success of my product? So this is, again, holistic end to end. Well, what do I do after the tree has fallen? So in summary, I covered quite a bit here that's going to be covered over in 2 days with exercises and case studies. But we're going to talk about the rich, comprehensive, well-organized toolkit and how to use the toolkit. And it does bring this discipline. Again, that word discipline is in there repeatedly because it's not just haphazard. We have some structure around it. We have some idea of framing it in order to decide what am I trying to do, so what is my best choice in this context. And then understanding your options are, which leads to one's work in different contexts, better decision. Give an example, we have our goal decision diagrams. Based on decisions we made in iteration 1, that may modify our decision diagram for the next time somebody does a project similar to this. We may have decided we wanted to do personas, let's say, and we decided a little bit later on that personas were too overwhelming, that we need to be a little bit more generic on our customer type and focus a little bit more on perhaps delivery through the value stream. Continuous improvement is going to happen all sorts of different ways. By the way, you'll also see our principles in this honeycomb diagram and a little bit of story behind the honeycomb. Actually, Andy Burns and I were both engaged in the first meeting of Discipline Agile with PMI. They were kind of rolling out how to deliver this and all that. And they only had 7 when we first met. And then they added one which had to do with the organizational focus on the product, et cetera. And the honeycomb started getting a little bit out of control. So that's why you saw it earlier in the mindset presented as a bullet list. But you will see the honeycomb occasionally in the class. Okay, so we're going to be giving you training opportunity, and these are the objectives. I won't necessarily read them to you line by line, but kind of give you an idea. Understand the mindset and the principles. Multiple agile and lean approaches. We're going to talk Scrum, we're going to talk Kanban, but not in a lot of detail. We're just going to say that those are acceptable practices, and we'll look at those practices whether they could fit in an iteration. We're going to talk about agile, lean, but we're also going to talk about the mindset across the organization, not just within the team, how you can live agile every day and help the whole organization become more agile, more nimble. Put the strategies into action on your teams. Then learn how to apply DA toolkit for the best way of working, the WOW, for you and your team and your unique situation. Continuous improvement. I like to use the analogy, if any of you remember, there was a show a couple of years ago called The New Yankee Workshop with a guy named Norm Abrams, who was a master carpenter who used to work on this old house, et cetera. And he had a show where he basically took a walnut tree from his front yard, cut it down, took it into his workshop and went it through lathes and all that other stuff, blah, 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 and made a beautiful china cabinet. Well, I can guarantee you that you could give me the same tree and the same tools, and I would not produce anywhere near as beautiful a china cabinet as Norm did, because he knew how to use the tools. And so that's what we're helping you to do, is get familiar with the tools, comfortable enough to start using them and learning as you go. And we're also going to help you be prepared to take the certification exam. The exam fee is included in the tuition, but I will say 30 days, and they're pretty strict on the 30 days. And then the requirements for this class, you don't need any Agile experience. It's introductory training. And if you weren't even involved in any kind of product development, you can still get you introduction to Agile and how it works through this class. Because it's not just disciplined Agile. We talk a lot about the Agile mindset, which spans everything. And then there is a promo code. Again, we'll make these available to you. I believe it's 50% off. We're through the Columbus chapter, and we're kind of expanding this to everybody here for the initial go around in December. But you need to use the code in order to get the discount. And the training is next week, Thursday and Friday. The things you'll get, like I said, if you go to the PMI-COC website, Google it, it'll give you the opportunity to be able to register. And if you need the code or anything, you can send it either to me or we'll get to Andy, whatever, we'll get you that information. This is my contact information. As you can tell, I've got a lot of acronyms behind my name. I've been around the PMI for a while. I joked I was certified last century, and I'm a disciplined Agile champion for the Central Ohio chapter. And hopefully you guys found enough to be interested in pursuing it. Like I said, I think it's a good foot in the door for Agile certification. It's not tied to one specific methodology like a certified Scrum Master, but it does look at delivering value across the enterprise. So with that being said, this will open up if anybody has any question. Andy, I got to apologize. I didn't have my chat window open. I don't know if any questions came in through chat or not.
They didn't, but people should feel free to just unmute yourself and you can ask questions if you'd like.
Yep. By the way, welcome, Shane.
Thanks. I had to find unmute.
Okay. By the way, as a side note, one of the things you'll also get out of this class is he's learning the tool Miro. The classes actually do case studies where you do breakout sessions and you track your progress through Miro boards. And, that in and of itself is a nice little experience. Well, I guess I can give you guys back 10 minutes of the hour we had asked for. And again, hopefully you can pursue this a little bit more. If you're interested, again, an email for me is shown there at the bottom. And by the way, that is me, the guy with the beard, as you've been noticing. And the class next week, if you're all real good, I might even don a red hat. Go ho ho.
Santa Dave.
Yeah, but then I'd have to tell my backstory too, but that I'll reserve.
All righty. I'm going to stop recording here.
Okay. So any questions for you guys off the record?
All righty.
Thank you, Dave
Oh, thank you.
and Andy.
Thank you so much for coming today. And feel free to share that code with friends and family, as they say, if you have anyone that wishes to come.
Yeah, I should have put a date deadline on here. We need to have you registered by Monday because we need to prep things to get the codes from PMI and other stuff. PMI's changed their training model a little bit, and I think we're all in the learning curve stage of that.
Yeah, it's all automated, and it's a very hard date. So, all righty. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting and thank everybody for coming today. And we'll go ahead and post this video to our website.
Okay. Thank you all.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye.